evening, everyone, and welcome to the EAB Auditorium. We have a wonderful performance for you tonight, and we hope you enjoy it. I'm Miles Coda.
And I'm Renee Alicio. Tonight, Landmark College is proud to present Sandglass Theater, a very talented and famous group of puppeteers.
Tonight's performance is covers the Tonight's performance covers an important issue in Polish culture, which is the Poland's history of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism refers to the dislike and mistreatment of Jews. Between the years 1906 and 1968, Poland drove 40,000 Jews out of their country. Could you believe that?
This performance by Sandglass Theater will show the spirit of Poland's ghetto and the ejection of Jews from Poland between 1906 and 1968.
So, without further ado, please welcome Sandglass Theater.
Thanks. I'm Peter Gould, and I'm not Sandglass, but I was asked to come and to sort of be here tonight to make sure that the conversation flows. I work in theater, and I'm a writer. And about 35 years ago, I wrote a play that I thought was going to change United States society, was going to change the world, because I fervently believe in the idea of theater for social change. It's also been an honor for me for the past 5 years to work with Eric Bass, as he and I vainly so far have tried to institute a program in theater and arts for social change up at SIT, and so our progress so far has been slow, and it's partly because the whole idea of theater for social change, arts for social change, might be open to some debate, which is a conversational point that we may touch upon here this evening. So I think that in order to get things going, we'll introduce the whole troupe, and you'll get a little bit of information first about how this play, which we all hope that you'll come to see this week, first got its start. Okay, Eric?
Okay. I'm Eric. Some of you know me, and some of you know me from speaking in this series last year.
Eric, can we get each of you to stand up when you're talking?
Do you need that?
Yes.
Not carry you very well.
Okay, did you all hear that? When you speak, stand.
I'm Eric. And there are, in fact, two companies on this. It's not a stage. There's two companies in the pit today. And so representing Sandglass, I'm here, co-founder, and my wife and collaborator, Inez, our daughter, Shoshi, who is a performer and the choreographer of the piece we're going to be talking about, and our colleagues from the Bialystok Puppet Theater. So if I could just introduce them. On my right, the former director of the theater and one of the instigators of this project. Basically, we dreamed this up together. This is Marek Vashkil. The translator of the play, Piotr, okay, and 4 actors of the company, Mikał, Iza, Eliza, and Zbyszek. So this is the piece we're going to be talking about, is a piece that's performed by Shoshi, Mikał, Iza, Eliza, and Zbyszek. And so we hope that part of what we talk about together will also be what the piece is, but also how it was made and what everybody does in it. Okay, so that's a brief introduction to who we are.
Well, Eric,
Well, Peter.
You briefly said that this idea is something that you have worked on for a long time, but I would like to find out where the idea first struck and what were some of the steps which brought you finally to here to this place. I don't know if you want to translate again.
Well, hello, I'm Mark. I will start in English, but I think it will be wonderful to listen a little bit much more Polish language. We have Peter, which is with us, and Peter can translate. I think it will be very funny for you just to listen Polish language. That I start to speak in Polish, okay? If you need, we can speak in English, but it is a very international meeting. Then I think the idea to speak in different languages is one of the starting point to have our conference, our symposium. Great. Peter, you will translate now.
And I will feel more necessary.
Teatr Lalek jest niezwykłą instytucją.
Puppet Theater is an amazing institution.
Jest kompletnie inny w Polsce i w Stanach Zjednoczonych.
It's completely different in Poland and in the United States.
Nasz teatr w Polsce, w Białymstoku,
Our theater back in Bialystok,
mający tradycję 50, prawie 60 lat,
having a tradition of more than 50 years of work.
jest dużym zespołem ludzi, pracuje w nim prawie 70 osób.
It's a big team of people, over 70 people work there.
Prawie 30 osób w zespole artystycznym.
30 actors working non-stop as a full-time job.
Mamy 3 sceny,
We have 3 stages,
małe,
small,
ale
but
nie takie małe.
not so small.
Jedna ma 40 osób, 40
One
widzów.
is 40 people audience,
Jedna jest dla 100 widzów,
100 people audience,
trzecia dla 180.
180 people audience.
Jest to teatr, który gra codziennie.
It's a theater which performs every day.
Rano każdego dnia oprócz poniedziałku gramy dla dzieci.
Besides Monday, every morning we perform for children.
Wieczorami, w piątek, sobotę, niedzielę gramy przedstawienia lalkowe dla dorosłych.
And in the evenings, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we perform performances for adults.
Ta tradycja grania dla dorosłych przedstawień lalkowych ma 40 kilka lat.
The tradition of performing for adult audience has more than 40 years.
Miałem szczęście kierować tym zespołem przez 7 lat.
I was really happy to direct the whole team for more than 7 years.
Od 2 tygodni jestem wolnym człowiekiem.
For 2 last weeks, he's a free person, free man.
Ale chcę powiedzieć, że to się zawsze wiąże z pewną wizją dyrektora teatru, jaki teatr chce
But
robić.
it's always connected with who the boss of the theater is and what kind of theater he wants to make.
Ponieważ ja bardzo dużo podróżuję po świecie
He travels a lot around the world.
i wiem, że teatr lalek na świecie jest nieprawdopodobnie bogaty.
And I know that the puppet theater in the world is extremely rich. And
Moją jakby pasją było zaprosić do Białegostoku
my passion was to invite to Bialystok
bardzo różnych
very
artystów z
different
bardzo
artists
różnych krajów,
from different countries,
po to, żeby pokazać, jaki jest teatr, jaki może być teatr lalek.
in order to show what is and how various it can be around the world. The puppet theater.
Zarówno w sensie technicznym,
In terms of technical,
kiedy mówimy o rodzajach lalek, bo
we
to
talk
jest
about
bogactwo niewiarygodne.
different types of puppets, because it's an abundant subject.
Kiedy mówimy o pewnym procesie twórczym, myślenia o tym, jak ma powstać spektakl.
In terms of way of thinking about creating the performance,
I kiedy myślimy o repertuarze tego teatru, bo w końcu coś gramy dla publiczności.
repertoire the theater, because we perform for people.
Eric Bass był jednym z twórców, artystów, z którym spotkałem się bardzo dawno temu.
Eric was one of the artists who I met long time ago.
I byłem zafascynowany
I
jego
was
wizją
fascinated
teatru,
about his vision of theater.
jego
His,
techniką pracy z lalką i techniką
The way-
pracy z
the
aktorem.
way he worked with actors and the way he worked with puppets.
Jego takim intelektualnym podejściem do
His
teatru lalek.
intellectual approach to puppet theater.
I kiedy po latach spotkaliśmy się
And when
po raz
we met
kolejny,
after many years again,
Pomyślałem sobie, że Eric Bass powinien spotkać się z moim zespołem
Eric should meet his team
i wspólnie powinniśmy pomiędzy Sandglass Theater i Białostockim Teatrem Lalek zrobić spektakl.
and we should make a cooperation of our two theaters.
Eric przedstawił mi kilka różnych propozycji.
Eric suggested me a few different options.
Różnych autorów,
Different
amerykańskich,
authors,
europejskich.
American, European.
Ale ja sobie pomyślałem wtedy, że
But I thought that
jest taki temat, który jest tematem delikatnym.
there is a subject which is a touchy subject.
Problem stosunków polsko-żydowskich,
Problem of difficult relationship of Poles and Jews.
które są bardzo skomplikowane
They're
w
very
historii,
complicated,
do których każdy z nas ma jakiś swój własny stosunek.
for which everybody has his own approach.
W Polsce przez wieki mieszkało miliony ludzi
Millions of-
narodowości żydowskiej.
Millions of Jews have been living in Poland for many,
I
many
w
years.
pewnym momencie oni wszyscy zmuszeni byli do wyjechania.
And one time they were all forced to leave.
I ponieważ ten problem antysemityzmu wraca, nie tylko w Polsce, wraca w wielu krajach na całym świecie.
And because the problem of anti-Semitism is coming back not only in Poland but in many countries in the world,
Pomyślałem sobie, że jest pewnym obowiązkiem każdej generacji ludzi zajęcie stanowiska wobec tej tematyki trudnej.
I felt that we are obliged to tackle this subject, the difficult subject. It's our duty.
No i tak to się zaczęło.
That's
A
how it
reszta,
began.
a reszta to fascynująca, trudna praca
And the rest is fascinating, difficult work
pomiędzy zespołem Sandglass Theater
between Sandglass Theater
i moim zespołem.
and my team.
Dlatego, że należymy do różnych generacji.
Because we belong to different generations.
Mamy zupełnie inną pamięć przeszłości.
We have completely different memory of the past,
Mamy inne doświadczenia.
different experiences,
Pewnie mamy inne marzenia.
probably different dreams.
Ale mamy coś wspólnego,
But we have something in common
z czym powinniśmy się wciąż mierzyć
with which we should tackle.
i powinniśmy rozwiązywać problemy,
We should solve problems,
które albo historia przed nami zbudowała,
which either history put us in front of,
albo my sami je budujemy.
or we build them.
No i tak się zaczęła ta praca.
That's
Dalej
how the
może
work
Erik
started.
powiedzieć, jak to wyglądało na scenie, bo nie było łatwo.
Maybe Eric will tell you how difficult was it, because it wasn't easy.
Would you want to add to that, Eric?
So I think what I'd like to do, if it's all right with all of you, is to just tell you the story of the play very briefly, and then show you a little 7-minute trailer of so you get a sense of the visuals, and then that's kind of grounds to open up a discussion. I worked, before Marek was the director of the Bialystok Puppet Theater, Marek was the director of the Theater Academy in Bialystok. And 7 years ago, I directed a production with students at the Theater Academy. So I had been in Bialystok before. And 7 years ago, when I was in Bialystok, I was walking through the Central Park, and found the park very dark in the evening with these huge leaves on the trees. And then there was a noise, I don't remember what it was, but all these leaves suddenly got very loud and flew up into the air. And I realized they weren't leaves, they were really big black birds. And as I got to spend about 6 weeks in Bialystok at that time, I discovered that these birds have a very strong presence in Bialystok. They're very loud, and I had been in a conversation with someone just before meeting these birds about the Bialystok ghetto. Bialystok lost about 50,000 Jews in the Holocaust, just that one city, and it's a small city. And when I saw these birds, and I just looked at them in these long black coats, and they were so loud and constantly arguing, I said, of course you realize that these are the spirits of the 50,000 Jews that we lost in the Holocaust from Bialystok, and they're not leaving. And whoever I said that to looked at me rather strangely, and I realized that this vision was not getting across somehow. So when Marek talked to me about writing a piece for the theater, and was particularly interested in it being something on a Jewish theme, I went right back to that particular moment, that particular vision, and the feeling of the presence there. And Inez and Marek and I were sitting in we actually met in New York City in a coffee shop. Bialystok Puppet Theater was on tour in New York. That was about 4 years ago, something.
2 years
ago. Huh?
2, maybe 3.
3? 3 years ago. We'll call it 3. And we discussed the idea of beginning with kind of the beginning of the 20th century, beginning with 1906, which was the year of the big pogrom in Bialystok, and that was the time of the pogroms, and going through the Holocaust, going through the big expulsion of 1968, which is a very interesting story in itself, and coming into the present. And so in writing the piece, we thought, well, what's the present? How do we open this discussion? And Inez and I had been particularly interested in working with our daughter, who's a choreographer. And so with that idea, we kind of launched into this fiction that a young American Jewish dancer goes to Bialystok and meets the same birds that I met. But in this particular fiction, 3 of those birds transform right in front of her, and they become the physical embodiments of the people they once were. One from 1906, one from 1941, and one from 1968. And each of them tells her a story. And the character Shoshi plays, a character we've named Henny, is in Bialystok because she has met the character that Mikhail plays, a young Polish dancer named Janek, and she has come to work on a piece with him based on a letter that she's carrying. And we understand that her grandfather came from Bialystok, and this letter has passed down through the family. But we don't know what's in the letter. And we don't know until the very end what's in the letter. This is called dramatic structure. But in a nutshell, the first of the 3 spirits, who is a kind of a classic-looking shtetl rabbi, is there, and he tells. He's asked a question in the middle of the pogrom. He's asked a question: why does this happen to us? And in typical rabbinic fashion, he answers with a story that does not directly address the question, but addresses it in philosophical terms. And so for this story, I did a lot of reading, and I did a lot of reading of the writings of a Yiddish writer of that period, a Hasidic writer named Yitzhak Leib Peretz. And it's a very beautiful story that basically talks about how do I tell you the story without giving the whole story away?
Don't tell so much.
Huh?
Don't tell them.
I won't tell you so much. But it basically talks about the struggle in each of us to balance our humanity with our more violent animal side. The second story is a story that came from about the ghetto, and it came from just reading again a lot of books about the Warsaw Ghetto, the Łódź Ghetto or Lodz Ghetto, the Bialystok Ghetto, and being very interested in this relationship of the inside of the ghetto to the outside. And certainly when I had lived for 4 years in Germany with Inez, and during that time visited a number of the Nazi death camps and concentration camps that some of you know, and been interested in this idea that it was very unhealthy for anyone outside the ghetto to know what was going on inside the ghetto. So there was a tension between knowing and not knowing what was happening. And so that comes into the story, and you'll see it in this little clip we show, in a very simple conversation that happens in a tunnel underneath the ghetto, in which a Polish peasant woman, played by Eliza, comes into the tunnel to sell black market bread to a Jewish woman from the ghetto, played by Isa, who has come to trade shoes made in the factory in the ghetto for the bread. And you'll see a little bit of that. It's a very, very dramatic, very stark scene. And that finally brought us to what to do about 1968. And the inspiration for that came from, I started touring in Poland in 1982. Was a festival in a town called Bialystok Puppet, a puppet theater festival, a very well-known festival that's still running. And at that time, I met the director of a puppet theater from Poland, who said to me, because he knew he could say it safely to me, he said, "I'm Jewish." This was in 1982. He said, "I'm Jewish, but if anybody finds out, I'll lose my job and my son will be kicked out of school." And that really, really stayed with me. And so when I got to this 1968 part of the story, I thought I would create a fictitious version of that puppet theater director who was about to be expelled from the country. And what was so much fun about that is we got to have a whole puppet theater scene within this puppet show. So, but it played very nicely into this. And then that brings us back to the ending where Henny and Janek finally do meet. And by this time, Henny is much more emotional than she expected to be. And I can say very briefly from the years that I lived in Germany that even knowing the history, it's not an emotional thing. Knowing history is okay, I know the history, great, I know what happened here. But being there, history can sometimes become much more emotional than you expect it to be, and you can, in my case certainly, I was really surprised by my own emotional experiences of something that I really didn't expect to have emotions about. And so that's the experience that I wrote for the character Henny that show she played. And so when she and Janek finally meet, they have a lot to work out. I won't say any more about how that happens, but I think if we watch this is just 7 minutes, you'll have a sense of the visuals. You know how the project started, you know a little bit of the story, you'll get a little of the visuals, and at that point, I'd love to turn the conversation back to Peter and to the cast and to you. Is that okay, Jeff? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Co?
Dlaczego? Dlaczego tak się dzieje? Posłuchaj. Posłuchaj.
$10.
Mogę dać ci 5.
Cena to 10.
5 i te buty.
Są za duże.
Ale to dla twojego męża.
Mam ciemny chleb.
Wezmę ciemny chleb.
Yes? Yannick? Yes, it's me. No, I'm still in the park. Parku. I know, I said I would walk toward you and meet you halfway, but I haven't left yet. Tutaj jestem ciągle. Something is happening. I can't explain. Co się dzieje dziwnego? Why don't you come here? Chodź tutaj. Yes, to the park. What am I doing? I'm watching. The birds. The birds.
Tak to było. W 1941 widziałaś. Też opowiedz historię. Oto co zdarzyło się w 1941. Historia opowiedziana przez ptaki. 50 000 odeszło w 1941. W murach tylko jednego getta nie urodziłaś się w 1941.
Powiedzą mi: panie Henryku, sprawa jest bardzo skomplikowana. Albo: panie Henryku, czy jest pan członkiem syjonistycznej 5. kolumny? A jeszcze tak niedawno, Jurku, oni nawet nie znali słowa syjonista.
Diego, maybe for you, for others, they sing something else I don't know.
What are you doing here?
You can see how powerful that was just in that short snippet. What I would like to know first, before hearing, what the audience wants to know, I would like to know to hear some voices of the actors of the experience that they had, because I get the feeling that they didn't quite know what roles they were going to be asked to play, and how the playing of that role was going to affect them, to move them, to change their lives by performing this play. So I just want to throw it out to the actors. Was there some kind of a surprise in store for them? How did it feel? How did it work out? What was the person that they were when they went in to the experience compared with the person that they were when what they are now?
I can't translate silence.
Are you doing it?
Maybe I will answer for that. Just to start, okay? Drodzy Państwo,
Ladies and gentlemen,
teatr to jest tylko teatr.
theater is only theater.
To nie jest życie.
It's not life.
Aktor wykonuje zawód.
Actor is doing his job.
Ważne jest, jak my
It is important
oddziaływujemy na widza.
how we influence the audience.
Aktor dzisiaj gra taką rolę, jutro gra inną rolę.
One day actor plays one role, the other day a different one.
To oczywiście bardzo trudne doświadczenia dla każdego z uczestników takiego projektu.
It's of course a difficult experience for every person who participates in such production.
Bo my wszyscy pochodzimy z jakichś środowisk.
Come from different environments, different backgrounds.
Mamy jakieś swoje historie
Have own
osobiste.
stories, personal stories
Naszych rodzin.
of our own families.
Ktoś jest obciążony jakimś tematem.
Somebody has a burden of some subject, of some
Ktoś
issue.
inny nigdy się nie spotkał.
Somebody has never come across such a subject.
W ogóle nawet nie zauważył, że taki problem jest.
A lot of people haven't even noticed the problem exists.
Po każdym spektaklu my się spotykamy z widzami.
After each performance, we meet our audience.
Z bardzo młodą widzą.
Very young audience.
Nastolatkami.
Teenagers.
Oni nic nie wiedzą.
They don't know anything about it.
To jest tłumaczenie od zera.
It is explaining from zero.
To jest próba zrozumienia świata
It is trying to understand the world
poprzez to, co się zobaczyło na
through what
scenie.
they have just seen on the stage.
Ale scena nigdy nie jest odbiciem, lustrem rzeczywistości.
But the stage is never the mirror, the reflection of reality.
Scena jest metaforą.
It's a metaphor of life.
I myślę, że ten spektakl
And I think this performance
ma taki ogromny wpływ
has this
na
great
tych widzów, z
influence
którymi do tej pory spotkaliśmy się.
on the audience we have met
Że oni się
from this
dowiadują
time.
czegoś, o czym nie wiedzieli.
They get to know something that they didn't know about.
Że poznają
They get to know
skomplikowany problem stosunków pomiędzy ludźmi
complicated problem of relationship between people
w trudnych warunkach historycznych.
in difficult historical conditions.
Widzieliście Państwo, że ta pierwsza scena to jest Polska, Białystok, Rosja.
You have seen that the first scene is Poland, Bialystok, Russia.
Druga scena, getto, to jest Białystok, Prusy Wschodnie.
The second part is Poland, but Prussia, Eastern Prussia.
Dopiero trzecia scena to jest Białystok, Polska.
And the third scene is Bialystok in Poland.
A cały czas jesteśmy w Polsce.
But we're still in Poland in all these three
I
scenes.
historie tych ludzi, którzy są na sali, ich ojców, ich dziadów,
But the stories of people sitting in the audience
są strasznie skomplikowane.
are very complicated.
Ja przepraszam, że długo mówię, ale jedno słowo.
Sorry
Mój
for speaking
dziadek.
so long, but one word. My
Pamiętam jego
grandfather,
opowieści, on nie żyje od wielu lat.
I remember his stories. He has been dead for many, many years.
Przysięgał na wierność cesarza austriackiego.
He was swearing for Austro-Hungarian
Monarch.
empire.
Potem, kilka lat później,
Emperor.
przysięgał wierność jako żołnierz carowi rosyjskiemu.
And then he swore to be loyal to the Russian Tsar.
Potem znalazł się w okopach II wojny światowej.
Then he found himself in the trenches of Second World War.
Historia tej generacji ludzi jest
The
nieprawdopodobna.
story of this generation of people is incredible.
Kiedy ja patrzę, jako przedstawiciel mojej generacji,
As a member of my generation, when I look at
na przeszłość moich rodziców
past
i
of my
moich
parents
dziadów,
and my grandparents,
to ja myślę, że my żyjemy na różnych światach.
so I think we are living in two different worlds.
Niewyobrażalnie skomplikowane.
Incredibly complicated.
Dla mnie problem polega na tym,
For me, problem is that
żeby odnosząc się do naszej dzisiejszej rzeczywistości,
so taking into account our present reality,
umieć rozumieć
should be able to understand
innych ludzi,
other people,
inne kultury,
other cultures,
inne punkty widzenia.
different points of view.
Ja noszę muzułmańskie czapki
I'm wearing Muslim hats
wiele lat.
many years.
To nie ma nic wspólnego z moim
It has nothing to do with my
wychowaniem, emocjami,
upbringing, emotions.
ale spotykam się w różnych krajach. Jesteś muzułmaninem.
But many people ask me whether I'm Muslim,
Mówię, nie,
and I
Jak
have
to?
to tell them no.
to niemożliwe.
And they say no, it's
I to jest taki
impossible.
drobny przykład, jak czytamy z takich powierzchownych znaków
It is a little example of how we judge a book by its cover,
i równocześnie jak potrzebna jest taka bliskość ludzi.
and at the same time how important it is to be together with people, close to people.
Ja jestem pierwszy raz w Vermont.
I'm first time in Vermont.
I muszę Państwu powiedzieć, że znajduję się w takim punkcie dosyć
I must
specjalnym.
say that I found myself in a very specific place.
Myślę, że koledzy dzielą moje
And I
emocje.
think that my colleagues share my emotions.
Po raz pierwszy spotykam się ze
For
społeczeństwem,
the first time I meet this society,
a podróżuję naprawdę dużo.
and I really travel a
W
lot.
każdym tygodniu jestem w innym
Every
kraju,
week I'm in a different country.
gdzie ludzie
So this is the place
lubią
where
być
people
razem,
like to be together,
gdzie sąsiedzi się odwiedzają,
where neighbors visit each other,
gdzie jest naprawdę pewien rodzaj społeczności,
where you can find real
która
community,
myślę sobie pomaga.
which I think helps each other.
mam taką nadzieję, że ten nasz spektakl
I hope that our performance,
Sandglass Theater i Białostockiego Teatru Lalek
collaboration of Sandglass and Bialystok Puppet
jest
Theater,
takim krokiem w tę stronę,
is a milestone towards
żeby poprzez teatr łagodzić napięcia między ludźmi,
soothing tensions between people,
żeby stawiać pytania,
to ask questions,
bo teatr jest po to, żeby stawiać pytania.
because theater is for asking questions.
Teatr nie proponuje gotowych rozwiązań.
We don't suggest ready answers.
Ten nasz spektakl
Our
odpowiada
performance doesn't
jasno,
answer
co się
clearly
zdarzy.
any questions and what will happen.
To zależy od bohaterów tego spektaklu.
It depends on the characters of the performance.
I myślę, że na tym polega siła teatru, siła sztuki.
I think that's the strength of the theater and art.
Za dużo.
Too much.
Is there anybody here who would like to add anything or subtract anything?
Tak, to może...
Go ahead.
Aktor jest taką istotą,
Actor is a creature
która najlepiej się wypowiada poprzez tekst napisany przez autora.
who can express him or herself by the text written by an author.
Reżyser jest najważniejszą osobą
Director is the most important
przy
person
realizacji
during
spektaklu.
realizing the performance.
To nasz Bóg.
It's our God.
A my
And we're
staramy się
trying to
spełnić Jego
fulfill
wizję.
His vision.
I ponieważ, tak jak wspomniałam, aktor najlepiej mówi cudzym tekstem,
And as I
to ja
mentioned,
dziękuję.
Actor speaks the best with somebody's line, so thank you.
Shoshi, how about you? Do you have anything to say about
Well,
that?
I was thinking about that as you said it, because I found a voice inside myself through the process that I didn't necessarily, that I hadn't necessarily discovered before. And in that sense, given the space and the vocation to make that discovery was very important. But it did become a very personal endeavor through a lot of it, through the history that I've inherited, the faith I have in theater, and the cultural experience of being in Bialystok and getting to partner with such virtuosic performers was really an honor. So, yes. It was quite a journey, and it went to many places, and it always came back again.
Great. One of the things that strikes me is that our friends from Poland here say that 70 people work at this theater, and it's a full-time job. And of course, there are theater staff, that there's directors, there's people who keep the theater working, and also marketed. And so the actors can well say, well, we're not the people who think the thoughts. We're not. We just do our jobs, which is. And please let them know what I'm saying. That we just do our jobs. It's the author, the director, that supplies us with the words. But you all understand that in the United States, for the most part, it's different. And almost every single person that I know who works in the field of theater for social change, or even just ensemble theater, is not doing that. We are a group of people throughout the United States who produce theater that is centered upon the actor, and in fact, the actors develop very much of the material themselves. So it's a very different different thing. And perhaps it's a very different thing because in the United States there is probably not so much government support for the arts. When I hear these people, there's 70 people work at the theater, my first question is, who pays their salary? Where's the money coming from? I mean, I would love to work in a center. You know, and is this true that they get, do they get a weekly paycheck from the state?
No.
I rest my case. I rest my case. If the United States were a civilization where most of the actors got a regular paycheck from the state, then that would be a completely different thing, and most of us would be satisfied to just perform the work that somebody else has written and somebody else has directed. But you're seeing here a work of such power performed by actors whose everyday life, who's devoted their lives to becoming just fantastic performers. I can't wait to see this play. Is there anybody out in the audience who was struck by the difference? The difference between these two approaches to theater? Yes. Back there in the back row.
I grew up in California, and I grew up doing theater from a very young age up until I was just before high school. And the difference is astonishing to me. That, you know, I grew up in one theater company when I was younger, where it was sort of like you know, we did a production of another play that had been done years, you know, prior, over and over again, you know, like Peter Pan or something. And then as I got older, my 8th grade year, my teacher's husband at the time was from Germany, and he brought in a completely new story that no one had ever done before. And I can see the difference, where in Poland they support the art of telling a story rather just through visual rather than the observation of written. It's the visualization also.
I saw somebody else who had a hand up that wanted to speak.
Ale wait.
Huh?
I just want to say something.
Yeah.
Translate.
Okay.
In Polish, sorry.
Yeah.
Jestem aktorem.
I'm an actor.
Yeah.
I przygotowując się do roli,
Preparing for a role,
czasami nie wiedząc, o czym jest spektakl do końca,
sometimes I don't know exactly what the performance is about.
małymi kroczkami
Step by step,
staram się zrozumieć, o czym jest ten
I
spektakl.
try to understand what is the performance about.
I miałem ogromną trudność, żeby zrozumieć, o czym jest ten
It was
spektakl.
extremely difficult for me to understand what is this performance about.
O czym my rozmawiamy? Czy my
What are we
rozmawiamy,
talking about?
czy my rozmawiamy o historii,
Are we talking about history
czy rozmawiamy o kontaktach międzyludzkich?
or about interpersonal relationships?
I zrozumiałem, że my rzeczywiście rozmawiamy o kontaktach międzyludzkich,
And I understood it's a latter one,
podpierając się historią.
basing on history.
I ciężko mi było bardzo zrozumieć
It's hard for me to
jako
understand
aktora, bo nigdy nie
as an
byłem w
actor,
tej sytuacji,
because I have never been in such situation,
historycznej sytuacji
historical
Holokaustu,
situation,
jak jeden człowiek drugiemu
how one person could
może czynić taką krzywdę.
do so much harm.
Przecież ja nigdy tego nie doświadczyłem.
I have never
Ty
experienced
nigdy
that.
tego nie
You have never
doświadczyłeś. Jako
experienced
młody
that
człowiek,
as a young person.
ty,
You,
każda młoda osoba,
every
która
young
tutaj
person
jest,
here,
w ogóle nie ma wyobrażenia o tym tak samo, jak ja, co
no
się wtedy działo.
idea, same like me, what happened that time.
I to jest ta trudność,
And that's the difficulty.
żeby zrozumieć, żeby móc to
To
zagrać w ogóle.
understand, to perform that.
I siedząc sobie w domku,
And sitting at home,
oglądając telewizję,
watching TV,
National Geographic, jest, filmy dokumentalne związane z historią.
movies connected with history.
Nawet niedawno w polskiej telewizji
Recently on Polish TV,
była świeża dokumentacja zebranych dokumentów z USA, które trafiły do Polski.
There was a program about documents collected here in the United States of Congress about Polish history.
Bardzo świeże.
Very fresh thing.
I nikt o tym wcześniej w Polsce nie wiedział, że rzeczywiście Amerykanie mają...
Nobody knew that in Poland, that Americans have
dokumenty, filmy,
films, movies,
związane z tym,
connected with
straszne filmy, ale filmy związane z tym, że to dotyczy dokładnie jednostki. Ja widziałem w tym filmie, w jednym z filmów,
I saw in one of these movies,
młodą osobę,
a young person,
która siedziała na polu,
who was sitting on the field, a Polish girl,
która siedziała przy swojej matce,
she was sitting by her mother,
martwej matce,
dead mother,
po bombardowaniu.
after a bombing.
I starałem się zrozumieć, dlaczego ona ani się nie uśmiecha,
why she's not smiling,
ani nie płacze.
She's not crying.
Ona po prostu
she's just
patrzy na tą osobę, tak jakby nie wiedziała, dlaczego to się dzieje.
Looking at her and not knowing why is it happening.
I ja starałem się zrozumieć, dlaczego my, młodzi ludzie, nie możemy zrozumieć, dlaczego tak się dzieje wokół nas, dlaczego ludzie giną, dlaczego masa ludzi ginie. I dlaczego jedna jednostka, która ginie obok nas, tak bardzo dotyczy nas i tak bardzo nas nie rusza to. I tak mi ciężko było to zrozumieć, że ja do tej pory ciężko mi grać tą rolę jako Janka. Powiem inaczej, może ciężko i łatwo. Dlatego, że mnie to w ogóle nie dotyczy. Ja mam tutaj łatwość w tej roli, że wychodząc na scenę po prostu spotykam Żydówkę, która ma korzenie
Polish origin.
Gdzieś tam w Białymstoku, która jest związana z Żydami, która jest związana z całym tym Holokaustem. I ja nie rozumiem, co ona do mnie mówi.
And I don't understand what she's talking to me.
Ja po prostu chcę nawiązać z nią typowo przyjacielski kontakt. I w ogóle nie myślę, co się działo wcześniej, za mną. Taką miałem łatwość. Ale przygotowując się do roli, musiałem przebrnąć przez ten cały horror, przez historię.
But preparing for the performance, I had to dig through the history, the terrible history.
I do tej pory tego nie rozumiem.
And I still don't understand it.
Thank you.
Comment from the audience, yes?
I wonder if anybody could talk about what it was like for you to work with puppets as actors as opposed to working with robots. What that allowed you to do.
Co to umożliwiło nam zrobić pracę z lalkami?
W każdym spektaklu,
Every performance,
w którym wykorzystywane są lalki,
we use puppets.
Lalki są tworzone oddzielnie do każdego spektaklu.
Puppets are created especially for particular performances.
Co oznacza, że przy każdym spektaklu,
which means in every performance,
możemy mieć do czynienia z innym rodzajem lalek.
we can use different kinds of puppets.
Tutaj akurat otrzymaliśmy
received
stolikowe,
table puppets,
które mogliście zobaczyć na filmie.
See on the film.
Eryk nauczył nas, bo można powiedzieć, że nauczył nas, w jaki sposób animować tymi lalkami.
Eric taught us how to animate these puppets.
Jak patrzeć na te lalki.
How to look at them.
Jak trzymać.
How to hold them.
Zresztą przy każdym spektaklu my musimy się od nowa uczyć, jak animować lalkami.
With every performance we have to learn again how to animate the puppets.
Ponieważ każda lalka jest inna.
Because every puppet is different.
Cudowne przy tym spektaklu było to, że każda lalka
was that each puppet
była robiona pod aktora.
Was made especially for an actor.
Co oznacza, że na przykład jeżeli ja grałam Żydówkę,
which means if I performed a Jewish woman,
to mogłam powiedzieć, w jaki sposób chciałabym,
so I could express how I would like,
żeby ona pasowała do mojej dłoni, żeby łatwiej było mi ją trzymać, żeby łatwiej było mi ją ruszać. Mój kolega kiedyś powiedział, że aktorzy dramatyczni są ekstrawertykami,
dramatic actors are extrovertic,
a lalkowi introwertykami.
puppeteers are introverted.
Co oznacza, że
Which means
bardzo często łatwiej wyrazić nam emocje właśnie przez lalkę.
Which means for us it's very often more easy to express our emotions through puppets.
I wydaje mi się również, że ten spektakl stał się bardziej uniwersalny.
And I think that performance is more universal because we've used puppets.
Dlatego też mogliśmy pokazać coś
That's why we
niesamowitego.
could show something amazing.
Tę przemianę,
The transformation from birds to
właśnie lalkę,
puppet,
jakąś postać,
to a person,
postać z historii.
historical person, like that. Thank you.
Back there.
First of all, dziękuję.
Dziękuję.
And I was also going along with the puppets. I was curious. I feel as though your work with the puppets is such a specialized craft and requires so much work and so much training to go into it, and that your work is obviously, you're very skilled. And that I feel that your way of telling this story is very unique, and that it is, but it is, to me, not very well known, sort of, in the sense that there are not as many mainstream sort of theaters that will use puppets, or I guess I'm sort of thinking for the United States, and that use what you do. Do you feel like you would want to move towards making your craft more well known, or do you think you're happy with sort of this specialized area that you have in what you do?
Ale my jesteśmy bardzo dobrze znani.
We are well known.
Well said. Well said.
Białostocki Teatr Lalek jest
Bialystok Puppet Theater
najlepszym teatrem lalek.
is the best puppet theater in Poland.
I do tego jest bardzo znanym teatrem.
Well-known theater.
Także to nie jest tak, że my jesteśmy gdzieś tam na obrzeżach sztuki. My jesteśmy mainstreamem.
We are mainstream. So
you could answer that though, or I think, or Inez. And please stand up.
We are also very well known.
Yes, but in a much smaller circle.
I think that puppetry will always be a more esoteric art form. I don't think this will ever really enter the mainstream.
In the United States?
In the United States, unless you go onto television, which you have with Sesame Street, which is mainstream, and here you have the puppets. But I don't think that's the kind of style we would love to do. I think it takes a very specific performer to perform with puppets. As an actor, you have to be able to retreat behind the puppet, so that you don't outshine the puppet. You have to allow your craft come through the puppet. And I think that's not an easy training. It's not easy to do. Not everybody is skilled to do this. And we felt when we worked in Bialystok that the skill and training of our 4 actors was really amazing, because we bombarded them with something they had not done before. We also had a different style of working than they are used to work. And we enjoyed deeply the skill, the training, and the sensitivity towards what we wanted them to understand and how to deal with this puppet in front of them. And you will see it if you come to the show. There will be only 2 of them at the New England Youth Theater. You will see how beautiful they can do what we think is the most beautiful thing in puppet, when you as a performer are visible, but retreat completely behind the puppet. And that you as an audience experience the actor and the puppet and at the same time you can get your full focus on the puppet. It's a beautiful experience, and I think that's an experience that you don't have that often in normal theater. That's what I was thinking.
A good question. Very good question. Chip?
Yeah, kind of with what you said, and Inez, and in the film, a couple of people, Shoshi and her dance partner. I don't recall you're using puppets, and maybe I'm wrong about that, but I'm wondering if in the show you are only people characters or whether you're also puppeteers. And the bigger question is, in general, in a show like this, is there a mix of people who are acting as characters and people who are manipulating puppets, or do you kind of stay in your categories?
I think I don't manipulate a puppet in the show. I see myself as the witness to everything, along with the audience. You do both. But the character of Janek is also only an actor. And I think there's a metaphor again in where it's the human form, the present now, younger generation working out their cultural baggage together with the realm of the puppets and the stories they're telling and the history they're bringing, or how they relate with Henny, who's in the present now, as telling stories from the past, or being stuck in their puppet body, or how they could access more. So yes, there is that separation of puppet characters and human characters.
Let me just, can I just add to this?
Yes.
Excuse me. That one of the things that we do working with puppets is we distinguish between what we think of as different worlds, right? So Henny and the character of Janek, they are in our world. They are very much like the audience. They're here. They're in the moment. They are flesh and blood. The puppets are of the past. They are of a different world. They are in the world of story, or in the world of spirit, depends how you see it. What becomes very interesting then is, in what world are the puppeteers, and what role are the puppeteers playing when they are puppeting? Because all of these people are really, really fine actors. So what role are they acting when they are playing a puppet? And we haven't really talked about that, so I don't know actually what any of these actors would say about this. But I believe that as a character actor, playing Janek or playing Henny, your character is coming out of your body. As a puppeteer, your character has to be channeled through the object and not come out of your body, but who you are in that moment is an extension out the other side of the puppet. So you are a presence, you're there, you are acting the role of that extension. It's, I think, I don't know how you see it, but it's almost like acting the part of the shadow of the puppet you're playing. I don't know how that, if you feel that's so. It sounds nice. Okay. So I'm out of here.
Just one reflection, because in our tradition, it should be very well known that in our tradition, the East European tradition, Polish tradition, the training of the puppetry, it's firstly the training of the acting. It's very important. Everyone who is a puppeteer is an actor. And many puppeteers are performing in the drama theaters as well. They are really wonderful actors, plus puppeteers.
Great. Let's see.
Question.
Back in the back. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. So, my grandfather's, I'm actually Jewish, my grandfather lived by
right near Bialystok, like the city right next to it. So I was wondering if, like, the plot is very similar to actually what happened back then.
To jest fikcja literacka. To jest fikcja literacka i tak wydaje mi się, że w zasadzie my z Michałem jesteśmy pierwszym pokoleniem, które jest w stanie mówić jakby o tych wydarzeniach bez...
Get married, that's why this is happening.
Can you repeat, please?
Wydaje mi się...
I guess. Be careful, because I can say something different.
Wydaje mi się, że ja i Michał
we both with Michał
należymy
belong to the generation,
w zasadzie do pierwszego pokolenia,
the first generation,
które jest w stanie jakby mówić
which is able to talk about it,
o historii polsko-żydowskiej bez
about the Polish-Jewish history
bez żadnego ogona, bez żadnych
without any strings attached, without any influences.
Jak Michał mówi, nas to w zasadzie
like Michał said, it doesn't concern us.
To nie znaczy, że się tym nie
It doesn't mean
interesujemy.
we're not interested, but
Ale nie mamy jakichś takich skojarzeń.
we don't have any associations.
W zasadzie Eryk był pierwszym Żydem, którego spotkałam.
Eric was probably the first Jew that I met.
Taka prawda.
I was also the first Jew my wife met.
To jeszcze mamy jakiś ten. Ale zdarzyło się tak, że jakby nie zostało to zrozumiane do końca, ta historia.
It wasn't understood. The story wasn't understood exactly.
I został wystosowany artykuł.
There was an article in Poland
wyjaśniający,
explaining
jak naprawdę wyglądała historia.
How the real story looked like.
Bo nie wszyscy są w stanie zrozumieć,
not everybody is able to understand that,
że historia Eryka jest uniwersalna.
That Eric's story is universal.
Że mogłaby się zdarzyć w zasadzie
It could happen actually
wszędzie.
everywhere.
Mogłaby się zdarzyć
It
w
could happen
Krakowie,
in Krakow,
w Warszawie,
in Warsaw,
w Łodzi.
in Lodz.
Ale Eryk umiejscowił ją
But
akurat w
Eric
Białymstoku.
placed it in Bialystok.
Uniwersalną historię
A universal story which is set
osadził akurat w naszym mieście.
in one city,
Bo
in our
zainspirowało
city.
go, nie wiem.
Because he was inspired by birds.
Ale ta historia
But the story
mogłaby się wydarzyć
could
wszędzie.
happen everywhere.
Dlatego jest tak niesamowite.
That's why it's so amazing.
One solid question more before we go our separate ways. Who thinks they have something that's going to sum everything up? Okay, go ahead.
I'm dying to know. I'm half Jewish and half Catholic, and I am dying to know how Poles feel about Jews now. I don't understand because my Catholic half says Poles love Mary, Jesus' mother. Why don't they get it that she's Jewish?
It's a Polish and Jewish joke.
Okay.
So that was Polish-Jewish joke.
Jesus Maria. Jesus Mary.
Jesus Mary, that's what we say. Jews too, I'm just translating, that was a joke.
You're going to tell me a Jewish?
No, that was a joke.
Oh, it wasn't funny.
I don't understand it, so I can't translate it. Didn't get it.
Ja mogę odpowiedzieć,
I can answer,
ale opowieścią.
With a story.
Okay?
Yeah.
Like a rabbi.
Well, he is the rabbi. He must have taken lessons.
Moją rodzinę katolicką
My Catholic family
wywieziono,
was taken,
Rosjanie
the
wywieźli
Russians took them
na Syberię
to the Siberia
w 1940 roku.
1940.
Wskazał ich, moją rodzinę,
his family was
człowiek,
shown to the Russians, the person
który był komunistą,
was a communist,
współpracował z Rosjanami,
was collaborating with the Russians,
był Żydem.
and he was Jewish.
Z nimi, moją rodziną razem,
My family, together with my family,
zostali wywiezieni
were sent
mojej rodziny serdeczni przyjaciele,
my family's dear friends,
bardzo zaprzyjaźnione dzieci,
children,
dorośli,
adults,
mężowie i tak
husbands,
dalej.
and so on and so forth.
byli Żydami.
And they were Jews.
W pewnym momencie Rosjanie na
One
Syberii
moment, the Russians on the Siberia
powiedzieli, że
said that
ci wywiezieni już nigdy do Polski nie wrócą
these people will never come back to Poland.
i że mają przyjąć dokument tożsamości.
And they should accept the Russian ID.
Ci, którzy nie przyjmą tego
And those
dokumentu,
who won't accept it
pójdą do więzienia
will go to prison
do czasu, aż go przyjmą.
until they accept it.
Po 3 miesiącach
After 3 months,
moja babcia
my grandmother
przyjęła ten dokument.
accepted this document, this ID,
pomyślawszy, że lepsze są
because she thought that it's better
żywe dzieci
to have
w Związku Radzieckim
live children in the
niż martwe.
Soviet Union than dead.
2 dorosłych, małżeństwo zaprzyjaźnionych Żydów,
Friends, Jewish friends, married couple,
którzy również byli z
were
babcią w
together
więzieniu,
with my grandmother in prison,
mieli 6, a nie 3
had
dzieci.
6 children, not 3,
I tylko poprosili moją
and
babcię,
only asked my grandmother
żeby od czasu do czasu
to,
do
from time
ich
to
dzieci
time,
zajrzała.
check her kids, how they are.
Obydwoje zmarli w
Both
więzieniu.
of them died in prison.
Dzieci pisały listy do babci z Australii.
Kids wrote letters from Australia.
Czy to wyjaśnia chociaż
Does it
trochę pani
explain a little
stosunek,
your
rozdarcie
attitude,
wewnętrzne?
the fact that you're torn apart?
Bo
Does it
wydaje mi
explain?
się,
Because
że jest podobne do mojego.
because I think I have the same feelings like you have.
Dziękuję.
Thank you. I'm not an artist. Sorry to interrupt because I'm just supposed to translate. But I don't know. I felt that your question was quite strange. What do you mean? If we know that Mary was Jewish, of course she was. Jesus was Jewish too.
Why do Poles hate Jews?
Who hates
Who
Jews?
hates Jews?
Listen, look, all I've heard
I'm
all my
Polish,
life.
and that's what I felt about your question.
Yeah.
That's not true. We are Polish. I'm Polish, and
I really like Eric.
And I should just say that, let me just say that Piotr told me one of the best Jewish jokes that I know.
I don't know why you think that we hate Jews. Where did you get it from?
Because of what happened in World War II.
But World War II was 72 years ago.
When I heard about 1968, I about fainted.
And
how could it happen so recently?
But for example, we can ask.
Any country's the perception of any country as being actively anti any race, racist or whatever, you know. One of the very interesting things about the 1968 expulsion, and I think that when we hear about this, we say 1968, boy, that's not that long ago. How could that happen? And I had done a number of interviews with Jews in New York who had been the people who were, you know, among the people who were expelled from Poland in 1968. And my first question was, well, how did you find out? And then it went on in each case to a discussion of at least an hour of the story. Most of the time, I believe, where kind of really violent racism or anti-Semitism or some kind of prejudice comes out, most of the time, I think it's an exploitation of something in the lowest elements of a population, usually by some government. And in the case of, I mean, this is me speaking now, okay? In the case of 1968, which is horrific to me, again, because I experience it as so recent, and I experience it as something that happened in Poland. At the same time, Poland was part of the Soviet Union. The Polish government under Gomulka was a Polish government, but it was also a Soviet government. Okay, and I think this is, and Piotr did a wonderful thing when he translated this play that I wrote, because he added some words sometimes that I didn't write appropriately, and one of them was, it's not a Soviet bear, right? I mean, this is. I mean, you really brought this to my attention. That in speaking to one of the people I interviewed in New York, he said and he's somebody who is, I mean, he will die furious at Poland, and this will never change because of his experience. But at the same time that that's so, he will also say that 1968, this is 1 year after the 1967 war. Okay? What was the 1967 war? Okay, this was a war of Israel against Arab states. What role was the United States and Russia playing in the 1967 war? We were playing the Cold War out on that site in the Middle East. And any biography of Nixon and Kissinger that you read is going to be very clear about this. We were arming Israel. Russia was arming Egypt. Everybody was hoping that they'll fight it out there so that we big powers don't have to get involved and fight it out. But the Cold War was being played out around this scenario. The Cold War was very present in the way Russia, I mean, Mark, I mean, you would know too. I mean, you can speak to this and tell me if I'm wrong. But the Cold War was being played out within the entire Soviet world in terms of how Russia was dictating what was going to happen in other Soviet bloc countries. The Russians were, as I heard the story, and I did not hear this academically, I heard this through interviews, so make of it what you will, but the Russians were asking of the other Soviet countries that they needed to use their factories to supply arms and military uniforms, shoes, so forth and so on, to armies in Egypt. Who was paying for this? Okay? So here's Russia says to Poland, for instance, and I don't know the exact thing, but they were saying, for instance, you are now making shoes for the Egyptian army. Poland is now making shoes for the Egyptian army. But Russia's not paying for it. Who's paying for it? Inflation is what's paying for it. So Poland, in 1968, goes into inflation. Somebody's got to be blamed. Okay? There's a base element of almost every country which is very, very happy to come up with a scapegoat. We experience this here all the time, and it's coming up in this election. Thank you. It's easy to exploit, and it moves into government policy really quickly. Okay, and that's I personally believe that's happening in this election here. It certainly was happening in 1968, where one of the things that Gomulka said, who was the president of Poland at the time, president, prime minister, I'm not sure what the title was, but he said in his speech, we do not hate Jews, he said, but we will not tolerate the Zionist fifth column in our country. Okay? And it's very clear, Zionist fifth column is a code word for Jews, because all of a sudden, all these people, some of whom didn't even know they were Jewish, because their parents had hidden it from them after the Holocaust, all of a sudden they were members of the Zionist fifth column. So this is not a simple question. The question of anti-Semitism or of any kind of racism, it's not a simple question, because I believe there's always some kind of exploitation involved. that uses whatever the base hatreds are, and they could be archetypical, they could be mythological, but they're really easy to exploit, especially if it profits a government by it. So when we're talking about Polish anti-Semitism, that's a completely different subject than talking about whether or not Poles hate Jews. Okay?
Yes.
Something really
And then we
very
have
short.
to-
Sorry, but I would like to say something much more general. That it's not the role of the theater to answer for the questions. Sorry. The role of the theater is to ask questions. In this show, in this performance, you can hear a wonderful text. Hani is asking one moment, maybe the birds are talking to you another history.
Maybe they are not talking to you, but they are talking to me. Right?
Yeah, okay.
Maybe for others they have
Others, that's right. Problem polega na tym,
The problem is that
że w tym spektaklu pojawia się takie zdanie.
performance there's this sentence.
Posłuchaj mojej historii.
Listen to my story.
Nie stawiaj mi zarzutów.
Don't blame me.
Ja nie jestem winny.
I'm not the one to blame.
Ja nie strzelałem.
I didn't shoot.
Ja nie
I
zabiłem.
didn't kill.
Ale ja chcę wiedzieć,
But I want to know
jaka jest moja historia.
what is my story.
Bo każdy z nas
Because every one of us
przez coś przeszedł.
has experienced something.
I tam jest piękne zdanie w
There's
tym
a beautiful
spektaklu.
sentence in this performance.
Opowiedz mi swoją historię.
Tell me your story.
I zobaczymy, czy możemy się
We will
spotkać.
see if we can change.
Pozwólmy się zrozumieć.
Let us understand each other.
Nie oceniajmy się,
Don't
że
judge-
nasi dziadowie zrobili
Don't
to czy
judge me that
tamto.
my grandfather did
Bo
something.
to jest sytuacja, w
Because
której
that's the situation in which
możemy zacząć do siebie pewnie
we
strzelać.
can start shooting to each other.
A rola sztuki polega
But
na
the
tym,
role of art is to
żeby zadać trudne
ask
pytania
difficult question.
i spróbować się zbliżyć do siebie.
Try to get closer to each other.
Spróbować się zrozumieć.
Try to understand each other.
Nie oceniać, bo
Don't
to nie jest
judge.
nasza rola. Od
It's
tego
not
jest
our role.
historia. Od tego są
History
historie.
judges. It's not
My
our
chcemy
role.
iść do przodu.
We want to go forward.
Chcemy szukać czegoś, co nas
We
powiąże.
want to find something that we have in
To był
common.
jeden z powodów, dlatego
That
tak
was one of
bardzo
the reasons.
mnie,
That's why
Erikowi,
me and Eric,
zależało na tym,
we
żeby
really wanted to
te trudne tematy spróbować połączyć ze
try
sobą.
to connect these difficult subjects
Przede
together.
wszystkim nie żeby się jakby w naszym kręgu
Not to
przepychać,
push each other in,
ale żeby zadać te
but
pytania
to ask
naszej
these
publiczności.
questions.
Jeśli nie rozwiązać, bo my nie rozwiążemy problemu,
We can't solve them, of course,
ale zmusić ich do pewnego
But to
intelektualnego wysiłku,
force ourselves and people for some
emocjonalnego
effort,
przeżycia.
emotional living these
Teatr
feelings.
ma budzić nasze emocje.
Theater is to fire our emotions.
I te emocje
Light our
mogą
emotions.
poprawiać świat.
These emotions can improve
Ja
the
w to
world.
głęboko wierzę i dlatego
And I
zajmuję się
believe
teatrem.
that. That's why I did it.
Ale rola aktora, który stoi na scenie,
But the role of actor who is on the stage
jest strasznie trudna.
is very difficult.
Trzeba mieć niebywałą odwagę, żeby wyjść na scenę
You have to be extremely courageous to be on stage
i opowiadać czyjąś
and
historię.
tell somebody's story.
Dziękuję.
Thank you.
Please let these people know where and when they can see this show.
Birds of Bialystok, Thursday and Friday evenings at the this week, Thursday and Friday evening at the New England Youth Theater. I believe it's almost sold out.
Friday is sold out.
Huh?
Friday is sold out.
Okay, still some seats for Thursday,
But Thursday is a gala, and gala is a little more expensive.
but the desserts will be great.
As a class.
I think it's important to know that for somebody like me, who works at the theater, that even if you hear, and I probably shouldn't be saying this, even if you hear that the Friday performance is sold out, it's always good for 3 or 4, 5 or 6 people to come, because sometimes people are interrupted in their desire to get to the theater, and there might be one seat or two that's available. So even if you hear that the theater is sold out, 2 or 3 people, 4 or 5 people come, and we'll try to squeeze you in.
Yeah. And please see the other performances in the festival. We have a performer from Israel on Friday and Saturday night at the Dummerston Grange. We have a marvelous show from Finland on Saturday and Sunday night about the true story of someone who was tried in medieval England for cross-dressing. Don't miss these shows. They're great.
Your performance is here as well, right?
Yes. And yes, thank you, Shauna. Yes, and Garbage Monster from Turkey will be here on school matinees at noon on Wednesday and Thursday, and on Sunday, right at the end of the festival, a wonderful circus performer who also uses puppets, but does, for my money, I think, the best male tutu act on a high bar that I've ever seen. That's Sunday at 11 and 3.
Where's that?
Right here at Landmark College.
Fine Arts Building?
Fine Arts Building, yes.
It's on the website.
Yeah, puppetsinthegreenmountains.com.
Thank you for coming and giving